Donald Trump unloaded on the media last night for their reporting of the Arizona audit commissioned by Republicans, which found no hard evidence of substantial fraud and, in fact, awarded Joe Biden 99 more votes and Trump 261 fewer votes. But the former president doesn't see it that way.
We also got the results of the Arizona audit, which were so disgracefully reported by those people right back there, and the headlines claiming that Biden won. It's so difficult because the Washington Post, the New York Times, and virtually every mainstream media source, CNN, forget it, they're so dishonest.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage in New York, Alexandra Wilkes, a commentator formerly with America Rising, and Clarence Page, columnist for the Chicago Tribune. Alex, the Republican president of the Arizona Senate, which commissioned the audit by the cyber ninjas, always makes me think of the Teenage Mutant Turtles, accepted the findings, saying numbers are numbers and truth is truth. And here's Trump trashing the fake news for its reporting. What is the press supposed to do when this audit says, yes, Joe Biden won the state by more than 10,000 votes?
Well, sure. So I think that the president has long had a beef with the media. But what the last 9 months of him being off social media has really illustrated to me is that social media is not only a very powerful tool for the president to engage and all campaigns to engage with their supporters, but also journalists as well. So you see with these rallies, the recount, there isn't as much of an ability for the president to shape it when he's not on the same platform where the journalists are, and they're looking for stories and they're looking at the various reporters who are at these rallies or covering the tweets, covering the Facebook posts. It really becomes, there's a dearth of commentary, I think, by the mainstream press, and that'll be interesting going into the midterm elections, right, where we see that his endorsement might be newsworthy. How does that really bear out?
Right. Well, gone are the days when those rallies got wall-to-wall television coverage. Clarence, the report did raise hypothetical problems. Signatures might have been suspect. Mail ballots might have come from the wrong address. Voters might have voted in multiple counties. Maricopa County officials, by the way, reject all this. So the press reported that, but Donald Trump still is calling the coverage of this Arizona audit dishonest.
Well, you can cite anecdotes all day long about what looks suspicious around the edges. Howard, I was investigating vote fraud in Chicago in the early 70s, and we found marginal offenses. When I say marginal, I mean not offenses that would change the outcome. Bill Baier, when he was Attorney General, said there hadn't been anything found that would have changed the outcome of that election. Now we see in Arizona, Joe Biden has again won, giving him another celebration if he wants to. And President Trump, when all else fails, blame the media. That, of course, is the old political slogan, and he's relying on it again.
All right. Well, what about Chicago in 1960? All right, let me move on to the book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, which says that Republican Senators Lindsey Graham and Mike Lee, two Trump allies, rejected the election fraud claims by Rudy Giuliani and other Trump lawyers back after the election. Lindsey Graham calling it third-grade stuff. And here's, Alex, the statement that Trump sent to the media. Lindsey and Mike should be ashamed of themselves for not putting up the fight necessary to win. Do the media love it when Trump seems to turn on his own allies?
I think that's always a story that the media likes, but what I would say is that these books aren't new. Going back to Theodore White with The Making of the President back in the 60s, you can always have these, you always have these books come after the elections with the anonymous sources told in narrative form. It's always usually pretty easy to spot who's cooperated with the books because they happen to tell the anecdotes that make them look good. But I think that in terms of the reporting of this and the president's response to this, it's kind of a wash because it's a little bit of an insider's game, I think, for most Americans.
Oh, that's an interesting point. I would point out Lindsey Graham not denying these particular quotes. Clarence, separately, the Washington Post broke a story based on a lawsuit showing that the Trump campaign after the election wrote a memo the week after the election debunking some of the wilder claims coming from Sidney Powell and other Trump lawyers about Dominion, the voting machine company, who somehow manipulated votes away from Trump, had ties to George Soros and Venezuela, but didn't say anything about it. So is that major news today? Do people still care? Do journalists obviously do care?
journalists care about conflict, and we certainly see it here. What intrigues me about Bob Woodward's new book is what it says about the disbelief on the Trump camp, the Trump side, that he had won the election, and how Bob Woodward and Bob Costa paint a scenario there of Rudy Giuliani really being the one who talks Trump into the idea of challenging the election and claiming victory, and pushes it again. Somebody put that bug in his ear. Bill Barr, among others, didn't go along with it, and they're not going along with it now. But we have now the foundation of a campaign for Trump's second election in his mind, and we may just see that happening.
Well, the reason it matters is that Trump is the de facto leader of the Republican Party, will be a factor in the midterms, and may well run again. Let me move on to this. George Bush hosting a Texas fundraiser for Liz Cheney, of course, the daughter of his vice president. Donald Trump's reaction: Rhino, Republican in name only, former President George W. Bush and his flunky Karl Rove are endorsing warmongering and very low polling Liz Cheney. Alex, whose side might the media be on in this particular battle?
Well, it is pretty interesting to see the media all of a sudden, find a warm embrace with people that they had previously characterized as warmongers. I remember back in the day, they threw terrible insults at former President Bush, but now they seem to be. Or the media seems to be covering him much more favorably than they once did. I think, though, that look, this is going to be a story that plays out across several different platforms or several different campaigns over the next cycle, is where the president weighs in, how ultimately it does. But ultimately, I don't think it's a surprise that the Bushes are hosting a fundraiser for
well, obviously,
Vice
Liz
President
Cheney
Cheney's
voted
daughter.
for Trump's impeachment, so there's a lot of bad blood there. And of course, Trump campaigned against Bush and Iraq. Clarence, I've got about 20 seconds. I mean, if George W. Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush, is a Republican in name only, does that suggest that Trump will use that label but for anybody who doesn't agree with his vision of where the GOP should be?
Well, we saw that Donald Trump turned against his own vice president when he saw that Mike Pence was not going to join in with him in the idea of tossing out the votes from the Electoral College that enabled Joe Biden to win. Only because Mike Pence was following the law, and Donald Trump insisted that he couldn't be bothered with that. That's the real reality here. Donald Trump decides who is a Republican and who isn't.
Well, ultimately, the voters decide. Clarence Page, Alex Wilkes, thanks very much for stopping by this Sunday. After the break,